So, welcome to Tech Talks. Today we have with us Irene Joshy, who is the APAC head at Kantar. Irene, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself in a few words before I do?
Thank you, Shani. Hi, my name is Irene, and I lead the creative domain for Kantar for the region, for the region essentially means APAC. What does that mean? That means that anything and everything to do with advertising, from the beginning of the idea all the way up to its optimization, is what I look after.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have Irene with us today. And we're going to talk about some of the things that Kantar has been doing, how some brands have pivoted, how, some of the things that we can learn and get inspired from, some of the trends. And let me start with the first question, which I'm sure, Irene, you are constantly asked questions about trends. And especially in 2020, what is happening consumer behavior. But what I want to understand from you is how the events of 2020 have impacted the creativity of brands in advertising and otherwise. So what are the cornerstones of communication that you feel that brands should bear in mind at this time?
Okay, that's two questions in one. I think fundamentally, and I'm guessing when you talk about this period, you're talking about COVID-19 and the recession, which is looming
Yes.
large on all of us. A lot of the work that we've been doing with consumers and otherwise, social media listening, etc., points in the direction of two critical aspects, and I'll elaborate about that in a minute. The first one is the importance of being meaningful. What does that really mean? So in our parlance, in brand parlance, and different companies word it differently, it basically boils down to, are you meeting consumer needs in the moment? And are you creating affinity for your brand? The second big pillar is about difference. How uniquely are you doing things? How are you communicating your messages? And are you demonstrating a dynamism, which is what is required in this time? I guess when we were having our initial chat, I did quote Stephen Pressfield when I said, most of us have two lives, right? The life we live and the unlived life within us. Between these two worlds it stands resistance. And a lot of brands are currently on that path of resistance where there is a certain sense of, things are going to come back to normal, things are going to come back to normal. Do I need to make, shifts? But at the same time, there's a huge opportunity because this is an unlived life for a brand that they can fulfill, they can take new dimensions, they can do a lot of new stuff. And for us, when we look at it, this is an opportunity to, yes, make a step change, but ensure that there is a fluidity between your identity that existed prior to COVID-19 and post COVID-19.
Interesting. And I like that bit that you're saying that brands are on the crux. They're in the resistance phase and they're on the crux of that big change. But there are some brands who've already made that change or who've done like some really innovative pivots in 2020 specifically. Any favorites that you have?
Um, I don't know how much of whether I would call it innovation, but I think there are a lot of things that have happened over a period of time which have brought not just people, have brought brands together. And for me, what struck me was Apple and Google coming together for contact tracing, right? Who would have thought that these two giants would collaborate for the larger good? Or if I take examples, because I don't want to pick up one brand that did a great product innovation, right? Of course, there are. We have had air purifier brands that have launched, wearable air purifiers, which really ensures that when you're traveling the next time, you feel a certain sense of safety and security. There are brands that have launched new skincare ranges which take care of white light and blue light, etc. But those are innovations which are still in the territory of, okay, this is an opportunity. They would probably be thinking about it for some time, and therefore they've launched it now. There have been renovations. But true partnerships, and going back to my first point on meaning, is where you identify what is the need of the hour for an entire nation or nations and come together and collaborate. So I think Apple and Google is one. The other one that comes to mind is the unlikely candidates like the auto industry. changing their production lines once again to do good, and manufacturing ventilators, or fashion brands going ahead and creating fancy masks and saying, don't think of the mask as something which is an irritating thing that you've got to strap on. We can make you feel better about it. And it's a small thing. And a lot of people might look at it and say, oh, that's so trivial. I mean, why does a mask need to be fashionable? You're wearing it. Make people feel good about things. And I think that's really important. The in the space of communication, I would also talk about PNG and the campaign of, I don't know if you've seen the ad, The Look, right, which is a Black Lives Matter piece of communication. But being able to pick an issue like that and very clearly take a stance, and you would have listened to them at the Cannes. So people going ahead and brands generating that kind of and demonstrating that kind of empathy by saying, I understand what this means. And it is not for my personal profiteering that I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I genuinely believe in these values. I think these three are what comes to mind as brands that have really made me sit up and say, wow, yeah, it's not an entire it's not an entirely profit driven world alone.
Exactly. I think and that's very interesting. And profit, it's not a profit driven world, but profit is driving so many businesses. And we're honestly seeing so much loss happening all around in terms of jobs, businesses, everything. So how is Kantar helping brands recover or, come back to normal or to some semblance of normalcy? What is, and, showing them a way forward, because this is a time when it's utter chaos. And for a business owner, I can understand it to be like, so much confusion. So how is Kantar kind of helping them bridge that gap?
Overarchingly, I don't know if you've been following Kantar work across COVID. We have hosted a lot of webinars, and the primary purpose behind those webinars is helping clients in that path of resistance, in easing, making that a lot more frictionless for them to change, to evolve, and get into the next space. Three buckets or three areas or territories of work have been: one is a lot of conversation around purpose and how do you evolve in some cases, and in some cases adapt your purpose to the new times, which could be people purpose, it could be planet purpose. How do I build for the future in terms of my sustainability? What can I do that makes consumers build that affinity with my brand, right? So that's one territory of conversation. The second is business as usual, which is whether it is advertising, whether it is tracking your brand, whether it is evolving your e-commerce platforms, going ahead and talking about what experience means today and how can you position even something like an e-commerce launch in a way that it comes across as a brand experience rather than just being a platform where I go and shop, right? So that's the second bucket. And underlying all of this, I think there are two key anchor points when it comes to understanding our times at present. One is behavioral, and the second one is building in neuroscience into everything that we do. Why do I say that? I think when the brain is clouded, behavior is the only evidence that we have. So instead of asking people how they feel, which is very difficult for us to articulate at this point in time, I don't know if I'm going through anxiety, I'm going through fear, I'm not even aware of certain things that might be happening in my brain, right? Or in my mind. That is where I think the importance of behavioral science and neuroscience, which has always been part of what we did, but we are pushing it further on to ensure that clients are making their decisions uh, in an informed and scientific manner.
Yeah, this piece about neuroscience is really interesting. And you and I were just talking about how you can kind of fool the brain into thinking you're feeling good or you're feeling bad, or either way. I think that's an interesting point that you bring in. And uh, so similarly, that was about brands and how you're helping brands. Similarly, what are the consumer insights that you think are becoming very important for brands to consider now? We've had pretty much similar, almost the same situation happening for the last almost 20 years. But now it's a really a turning point for brands where you have to sit up and listen to consumers very, very carefully. What do you think are some of those key insights that will become very important for brand recovery as of today?
I can't think of one insight because I
Maybe
think
multiple.
there's so much of use and abuse of the term insights in itself. But I think underpinning everything is a single concept of value. And when I say value, I don't mean value in the sense of matter and money. Value in every sense of the word. What I value, and so as a consumer, if there are certain things which have become suddenly of great importance to me, then recognize that this is of value to me and ensure that you're delivering on those. Um, Keeping value in mind, being able to create relevance and establish resonance with whatever you do. It might be in a simple packaging innovation. Because at this point in time, there are two things people really, genuinely, all the work that we have been doing indicates one good proportion of our population is just trying to cope and coping with everything, coping with lockdowns, coping with uncertainties, as you rightly mentioned. There are redundancies happening everywhere. So there is this entire, our brains kicking us into a fight or flight mode, right? So should I send my kid to school? Should I not? And that was never a decision that a parent had to make. Today, it is a very real decision. Do I send? Is it okay for my kid to lose a year, or is it not? So there is a lot of that coping that's happening now. When an entire culture goes through coping as a phenomenon, what they look for are either brands that can solve and ensure that I'm making my right decisions and assure me of the choices I'm making, or take my mind off it, uplift me. And we've been talking about this, I think, across all platforms, saying sadvertising does not work. Please do not send out sad messages because there is enough of darkness, gloom, and sorrow around. We do not need anything more to pull us down. So, what brands which can uplift you, brands that can assure you and help you cope and navigate the system, are brands that will have longevity. And those who don't will probably be left behind, and that is a real fear.
So I hear you that brands need to uplift their people and advertising doesn't work. Unfortunately, when brands do a lot of social listening, it's a lot of data being thrown at them, which is also confusing to a bit. So they may be hearing a lot of sad, nuances and sad conversations when they're doing social listening, sad messages coming up. But they need to realize that that's not the way they need to go. They need to go the uplift side, right? How can brands do stuff like this effectively? Converting insights that you're getting from social listening into campaigns that are actually effective.
Lovely. Okay, so I'm definitely going to send you. I've just today I shared a link to one of our webinars on neuroscience, and that's exactly what we've done. We've looked at social data. We've done some consumer work, and this was done in the US. And we've brought in three elements: pandemic, recession, BLM, right? And we've brought three of them together and we've looked at the sentiment where, and from a pure neuroscience perspective, what intuitive associations and what is really important to people, what are they battling with? That should be our fuel to say, if this is what they're going through, if anxiety is what they're going through, how can I elevate that? How can I take that away, right? So that's essentially, and that's commonsensical for most people, most marketers. But coming back to social listening, one and the most critical part of it is sift out the noise. There is so much noise. Sift out the noise if you truly and understand and define the purpose why you're getting into social listening. A lot of people listen not because they really want to listen, they just want to pick up nuggets and do something with it. If you're clear that what you want to find out is thought leadership, then keep in your search, in your analysis, build in influencers and cap those influencers by the number of followers that they have. If you're truly interested in understanding what consumers are and what they are saying, what the man on the street is saying, just take off the influencers. We recently did something on the entire fairness conversation that's happening in India now. And in our social media listening piece, we just sifted off influencers because they will have points of view. You have celebrities, you have skincare influencers, you have makeup artists, etc. talking. We said, let's take that noise off. And just look at how much is the average Indian woman who's on social media today feeling about this subject. That's when you're able to tell your client if it is genuine need or is it just herd mentality that tends to happen, the mob psychology that kicks in social media. So that becomes important. Building into it, and there are quite a few softwares that have inbuilt neurosemantic programming. You leverage those because then that tells you just by the usage of terms, the usage of words, is this post intended at shock value? What is the choice of language that people are using? And we know when you want to shock somebody, what you say, and when you genuinely believe in something, the way you articulate it, right? So it's important to keep that in mind. And look at social listening as one source. It is only one source. It's not, especially in large countries like India, and countries where social media penetration may not be 100%. It is a voice. It's a voice that needs to be heard because, fortunately or unfortunately for brands, that becomes the mouthpiece of public opinion today. So yes, listen to it, sift out the noise, and then curate your point of view basis what you're listening
in. And what do you think are some of the key traits that brands need to imbibe now to be able to recover and thrive in 2020 and beyond? So it's really now come to a 2020, 2021 kind of story. So what are those key traits that, we talked about empathy, we talked about value, creating value, we talked about purpose. So what are those really important 2 or 3 things that brands really need to get together now so that, it's a long-term play for them?
I would put it as an acronym called ACE. Okay, so ACE, one, agility. And I give that a lot of emphasis because if you're not agile, if you do not have the flexibility to change the way you do business or change the way you talk to people, so you've lost the plot. Things are going to change. In the next 3 months is what we can probably predict. The 3 months after that, we really don't know. I know that there are people who are planning holidays thinking, okay, January 2021. You never know what's going to happen in January 2021. So there is that uncertainty, and the only thing that will help you sail through it is agility. C, connectivity. Stay connected to your consumers. And E, empathy. So you want to ace it, you've got to ace it. You really have to be agile, you have to be connected, and you have to demonstrate empathy. Brands that, and there's enough evidence to show that, right? During the BLM controversy, when the entire social media was afire, brands that went ahead and did it as tokenism got completely wrapped on their knuckles. Brands that had the value system built into them to own and espouse a cause and even don an activistic role, they're the ones who got applauded, people rallied behind them and made them part of their lives. It's not when, and very often it's not when consumers adopt you. It's when consumers align with you and make you part of their lives that a brand actually gets meaning. That's when you really humanize a brand. And if you have to stay human, you have to adapt because consumers are adapting today. They're adapting rapidly. People who never ever went online and shopped are doing that. People who never believed in having frozen food are staying away from their wet markets and and local grocery stores and buying online. So consumers are demonstrating adaptive behavior. Consumers are connecting with each other. And you've seen platforms like Teams, Zoom, all of them helping people connect. and consumers are demonstrating empathy. It's high time brands started doing those too.
Brands need to mirror the consumer behavior and how they are changing. Thank you so much, Irene. That was a wonderful conversation and so many insights. I know insights is overrated, not overrated word, like you said, but so many insights for me to take back to the team and to our AdTech audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you with us.
The pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on this. It's a lovely experience and it's great to connect again with you. So thanks a ton, Shani.
Thank you, Irene.